Okay, well, meantime, let's bring on board now Probal Sen, the Senior Vice President of Research with Centrum Broking. Reliance Industries, of course, is the big stock in focus. It's not just the news with respect to KKR now buying the Reliance retail stake, but the fact that now Reliance has also taken the war to the postpaid front of things. So first up, Probal, thanks so much for joining us today. We've often been talking about how Mr. Mukesh Ambani is planning to do a Jio in retail. Do you think that that could be the case now, that, it'll be Reliance's retail business now which will come to the forefront, where, sort of the value of this retail business of Reliance will be discovered via all these stake sales and deals?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I think this is something that was made clear in the last few bits of commentary from Mr. Ambani, that, he made it clear in the recent statements that post Jio's value unlocking retail would be the next big thing, where there was several interested investors. And I think formally and informally, it's been made clear that there is a long queue of such transactions waiting to happen. So I would obviously be very, very surprised if this is just, this is not just the tip of the iceberg as far as, the wave of transactions, the way that we saw in Jio, one after the other. I would suspect that while retail may not follow the same trajectory, but it would be fairly similar in the sense that you will have several such transactions that will come through. And I would suspect that while the initial, big bang transaction on the lines of what Facebook did in Jio hasn't quite happened here, I would suspect that they would definitely be talking about even that kind of a strategic stake by some big player. Instead of just the 1% odd stakes that have been sold to KKR and Silver Lake as of now. I think the bigger positive really is that there are interlinkages between the digital services platform that they have set up, the digital infrastructure and the supply chain infra that they have already in place, with the omni-commerce or new commerce, as they call it, initiative of Reliance Retail, which is probably why you have such, interchangeability of the investors who have invested both in the digital as well as the retail domains. And I think today the real challenge for people to value this is to sort of continue to look at these two businesses as separate. Unlike, I suspect, the interchangeability and looking at it as a whole as a consumer platform that perhaps Reliance is looking at, and perhaps what Reliance is pitching to investors as well. I think the next trigger for valuations and the next trigger for re-rating will come when we perhaps have a better understanding of how these interconnectivity really works and how the digital services infrastructure really serves as the backbone of, reaching out to the traditional retail platform and supporting the kiranas and the middle-class small shops that is being targeted by JioMart. I think that will be the interesting thing to see over the next year or two.
Probal, Mr. Ambani had spoken about his target of making Reliance Industries net debt zero. We saw a series of then stake sales in Jio, and yeah, I think that was more than enough to make Reliance Industries net debt zero. We've already achieved that target. You spoke about how the investors as well that he's bringing on board for Jio and retail have this technology as well as retail bit, and the seamless sort of connectivity between retail and digital. So is that the main purpose behind the stake sale in retail? Because the target of net debt has already been achieved. So I just wanted to understand what the idea would be behind now, bringing on board other investors for the retail business.
No, I think you're right that, I don't really think that getting investors in retail has anything to do with the balance sheet per se right now. Given the kind of deleveraging, as you rightly mentioned, that has already happened, very clearly the balance sheet is probably in as strong a shape as it has been at any point of time in the last decade or so. I don't think that's the rationale. As you were pointing out, I think the idea really is to get investors on board who can add value to the business, bringing in their expertise in terms of, either having invested in retail companies in the past or being retail players themselves. So we are, as I said, I think that remains to be seen in terms of the profile of the investors that come into the retail business eventually. But if Jio were to be held as a benchmark, if you really notice, these kind of investors that have come in bring with them their own USPs. Facebook, brings with it its own expertise in terms of monetizing social data, for example, or, the data that it has on individuals, and really leveraging that to create revenue opportunities. While some of the venture capital investors like Silver Lake or KKR are known to sort of really invest in technology companies and helping them monetize content ecosystems, which is the second part. So for retail, I would say one obvious objective is to, unlock value to the extent we can. It helps the market discover a benchmark for this business. And eventually, obviously, I think all these businesses, my sense, let me qualify, would be that they would be listed as separate entities. I think that's the end game in a way, probably 2 years down the line. But before that, one, you set a benchmark, and two, I think you get a very specific set of capabilities as well on board, with some of these investors coming in, because all of them have experience in terms of investing in early stage digital and omni-channel retail opportunities. And I think Reliance would look to leverage that, really, and sort of grow this business and help them penetrate the traditional retail business. So I think it's a combination of two things, rather than deleveraging right now.
Okay, I'm going to just roll two questions into one. Firstly, you mentioned that finding a benchmark, finding a value for both Jio as well as retail. For Jio, it's of course done that through a series of transactions. It wants to do that for retail as well. Do you think that we could perhaps be looking at, these steps being sort of a pathway to maybe, a public listing for, these two segments of Reliance's business? And secondly, Reliance Industries is right now at roughly about 2,400 rupees. Do you think the market has priced in, the geofication, if I could call it that, of Reliance's retail business as well at this level?
I would like to venture to a certain extent, yes. It's all right to say that business but subscribe to for the initiative. I would say that around 2,500.
Definitely, we are having a bad connection with you at this point. Was going so well. Suddenly, I guess the Mumbai rain's playing havoc at this point of time. But we let you go, Probal. Thanks so much for joining us today on ET now to just sort of understand the idea behind now KKR buying, that stake in Reliance Retail's business. In all probability, it's going to be an expertise, to bring on board to manage the retail business, and then, of course, even to sort of, assign a value to that business.